Well, hello and welcome to this week's of Photographic Life. Photography is the most pervasive and arguably the most powerful art form of our time. It is also the least understood. For much of the 20th century, American schoolchildren have been led to believe that the camera never lies, that the images they see reproduced in newspapers and magazines and now on television provide accurate witness to the events of the day. But visual truths are no less elusive than other kinds. Obliged as a youngster to perform in a real-life American tragedy being played out on the Kansas plains, W.Eugene Smith learned early on that appearances deceive. But rather than mistrusting his eyes, he forced himself to see beneath surfaces, to create what he believed were deeper realities. For Smith, the craft of photography became the art of illusion. Yet Gene Smith made his living and his substantial reputation as a photojournalist, a calling in which fact takes precedence over fiction. In this supposedly objective endeavour, Smith invariably took a subjective stance. Indeed, he often became a participant in the lies he depicted through his camera. Where the accepted approach in photojournalism had been for the photographer to put himself in the reader's place, Smith found ways to project himself into his subject's place. If all art can be said to be autobiographical, at least in a symbolic sense, then photography might best be termed self-portraiture, because the camera generally binds the photographer to the moment observed. Even the most casual viewer should be able to discern from a picture where a photographer has been looking at what he or she has seen. But the seasoned reader of images learns to go beyond simple description to the visual dialogue also recorded. Call it the moment felt. That is the first 4 paragraphs of an incredibly powerful book which I recommend you all read. It's called W.Eugene Smith, Shadow and Substance, The Life and Work of an American Photographer, and it was written by Jim Hughes and published back in 1989. I bought it when it came out and I devoured it. It is an incredible story, beautifully written. We're at episode 405, and yet it has taken me this long to talk about my very favourite photographer. The photographer I suppose I turn to the most for his work, for his approach, and for that sense, I suppose, of outsiderness. I've always been attracted to the idea of the anarchic sense, that ability to step outside of what others are doing, to recognise the importance of self when making work. Now, why has it taken me this long? Well, I don't know really. I think primarily I didn't really feel as if I had a reason to talk about Eugene Smith until this point. So what sparked off my reason this time? Well, there is no doubt that the American attack on Iran always makes me think, or whenever there's an attack like that, it was the same with Iraq and with Afghanistan and so on and so forth, it always makes me think of photographers previously who have covered conflict and brought us the images of war which truly resonate and stay with us. And Eugene Smith was obviously somebody who did that in the Second World War, particularly with his images of Okinawa, but also with the sensitivity, I should say, of his images that were created in Japan, showing the effects of war. He was able to show the truth of war. Although, as Jim Hughes says, what is truth? It was Eugene Smith's truth. And increasingly, at a time when I see photographers talking about photography without any of that passion or connection or understanding that Eugene Smith brought to his work, it also makes me want to turn back to read about, learn about, and I suppose also to share photographers who did demonstrate that. Yes, they're from another time, but we can learn so much from those times. As history always shows us, it's cyclical. It's always coming back round. Nothing is new, and therefore the camera is not new. The photographer is not new. The situation is not new. What we need to bring to those elements is not new. Empathy, understanding, and I think most importantly, respect are the keys. Now, I'm not going to say that Eugene Smith was not a deeply flawed character. Of course he was. There have been more than enough films made about his life, books written, books published. But for me, Eugene Smith still remains the most important photographer. Whilst we're talking about truth and ethics, I suppose AI is the biggest threat to both of those things, isn't it? Well, I received a message from one of the listeners recently alerting me to something. It said this: "Hi Grant, as a regular listener to the podcast, I am of course aware that you are a big Bob Dylan fan." Well, yes, I am. You also often discuss topics relating to AI and its place within photography. For these reasons, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Lynn Goldsmith's recent image of Bob Dylan at the Wailing Wall that she created using AI tools and seems to have stirred a bit of debate. You can find the image in question on her photographer's Facebook page. Maybe a topic for an upcoming episode of the pod. Best, Sandy. Well, thank you, Sandy, for that. It actually encouraged me to reach out to Lynn, and she's actually going to be appearing on a future episode of the podcast, not talking about AI, but actually answering the Proust quiz. But I did go on to the Facebook page, and I thought Lynn had a very good riposte to a lot of the negative, critical comments that were being made about the work she'd made. It said this: "I have been asked if the image of Bob Dylan at the Wailing Wall I posted on January the 9th is AI. The photo of Bob is my photo of Bob. The Wailing Wall is my photo, and there are other pieces of other photos of mine in the image as well. Putting images together is something I have done for decades. I did a book of self-portraits where each image might have been made up to 100 images, but it looked like a single photograph. That book is called The Looking Glass. Photoshop was the tool of creation then. I now have added AI into my creative endeavours to make a single image that represents something I want to say. My work has always questioned what is real from what is imagined, so don't feel you are being fooled. Is this Bob's paint studio? No, but I like to think of it as his creation, a creation. Most of my images are an actual depiction of a moment in time. For me, making visuals is often about creating an image which makes the viewer feel they are part of a story. AI is here. There are good and bad, dangerous things about the usage of it. The same was true when Photoshop was introduced. The fact is, AI is here, and it is not going away. So I use it selectively to jumpstart my imagination, and hopefully yours. I don't do all of my work. I don't do it when I am dreaming. I should say, I don't do it on all of my work. I do it when I'm dreaming, says Lynn. Anyway, I think that's a pretty good riposte. And Lynn is, without doubt, a creative person who works across multiple platforms, and anybody who's aware of her career will be aware of that also. She also had a top 10 single in the UK. Did you know that? Well, anyway, really enjoyed that response. Thank you very much for making me aware of the image. I did feel a lot of the comments that were being made attacking Lynn were actually very ill-informed, but hey, that's social media for you. And look out for that episode in April. It's a fantastic conversation with Lynn. I really enjoyed talking with her. And she had some really interesting things to say, which perhaps is not a surprise. And speaking of interesting things, you have been responding to the podcasts as you always do. And I thank you for that. Do please keep them coming. Another one here. Hi, just listening to your podcast about Instagram. I'm a completely unknown photographer, having spent most of my working life as a documentary filmmaker. Now I am 82, and a few years ago I started sharing images on Instagram. I noticed that this Bill person was liking my New Mexico images. Wondering who he was, I of course Googled him and almost fell off my chair when I read that he had been the editor-in-chief of Life magazine. In my childhood, I had eagerly waited for Life to arrive at our house every week so I could devour it before my parents. At any rate, I was stunned, eventually got up my nerve to contact him. One thing led to another, and now I'm having a photography book, and so we moved to Petacar, published by the University of New Mexico Press in the end of June this year, with Bill as my editor and fantastic writer, and a gallery show in Santa Fe at the Obscura Gallery, end of May. I think it may be Obscura, but anyway, not sure. Might have just been a typo. So, to put it bluntly, this would never have happened without Instagram and Bill, of course. Thanks to both of you for this podcast, learning much. Just have to find the time to listen. Best, Lynn Adler. So thanks for that, Lynn. And of course, that Bill is Bill Shapiro. And we got a huge amount of response to the 2 episodes that we've now done on Instagram, particularly the second one, which was quite feisty. I hope you enjoyed that. Bill and I are still good friends, and I think it's really important that we both feel that we can have a real go at each other and still remain friends. How unusual that can be in this world in which we live. Another message came in. Hello, Mr. Scott. How very formal. Ralph Eugene Meatyard. The fellow who ran the Lexington Photo Club when Meatyard joined was none other than Van Darren Coke, who you know from, that's me of course, from the wonderful documentary that you did on Bill J. If you aren't aware of that film, I highly recommend it. Of course I do. The photographic life of Bill J, which is available for free to watch in its entire length. It's a full-length feature documentary, and that's available on YouTube. And there, of course, is a trailer for that film and the link for that at UnitedNationsOfPhotography.com on our homepage. Anyway, the message continues. I much enjoy the podcast. I go out photographing Kentucky pretty much every Saturday and listen on my iPod. Well, that's a nice throwback to the past, while roaming. So thank you to you, Grant, Bill, and Fiona. The messages keep on coming this episode. Lots and lots of you expressing interesting views. This one came in via our YouTube channel. Just so you know, we are on YouTube at UN of Photo. Please like and subscribe. Anyway, this comes from Steve Smith 581. Okay, where do I start? Firstly, the positives. Thanks to the Gagosian for showing these. He's referring to the Richard Avedon exhibition in their magnificent space for free. The prints themselves are poor. I say this as someone who has seen a lot of Avedon's work, attended his exhibitions across the world, most recently Relationships in Milan, an exhibition which never made it to the UK. Also, I have printed myself and have done so for over 30 years, both fibre-based and pigment Guisset inkjets. These prints are pigment-based on aluminium. That in itself is fine. Many great works these days are. But the white background of the portraits aren't white. There is a colour cast. Also, there has been too much dodging and burning around the eyes on several prints. In particular, the one of Billy Mudd looks like his face has foundation on it. In short, it's a great idea. Let's celebrate the 40-year anniversary of In the American West book release and the new release by showing the world some of these amazing portraits. It's just not executed well. I politely asked the receptionist who printed these when and where they were printed. Her reply was simply, yes, they are originals. To make matters worse, all of the images are mounted behind clear perspex, so you are at times fighting reflections. Sorry for being negative. I really don't like to do that at all, but this point of view has to be shared. Well, guess what? The Gagosian Gallery listens to the podcast, and they got back to us. Hi, Grant and Fiona. Thank you so much for discussing our exhibitions on the latest episode. I wanted to get in touch about Richard's show, as there was some discussion of the works being printed on aluminium. That's right, both Fiona and I did discuss the prints in the show. I was slightly dubious about them, and there we go. That was our conversation. Anyway, the Gagosian, or Laura at the Gagosian, continues, that information is on our website and in the press release. He also explored new methods of presentation. Mounting the prints on aluminium is quoted. The works in the show are lifetime prints made by Richard himself, mounted on aluminium and presented in plexiglass frames that he designed. In addition to being Richard's granddaughter, Caroline, who's also involved with the curation of the exhibition, also works for the Richard Avedon Foundation. As you both know, they're very careful about adhering to Richard's strictures and preferences during his lifetime, given how particular he was. And he was. I can tell you a little story about that afterwards. Not only about printing and presentation, but also about how the images are reproduced. Any amendments or deviations wouldn't be sanctioned by the Foundation. If you have any queries or need further details, I'm always happy to help. That was Laura at the Gagosian, and thank you very much, Laura. It was wonderful that you got back to us and gave us that clarification. I should say, I was talking there briefly about Avedon and how he looked after his prints. I did work with him in New York, and when he sent me the print that he produced, it was suspended between pieces of sponge and pins, and it meant that the actual print touched no other surface, which is incredibly professional, something I've never seen before. Anyway, so lots of you getting back to us, really informed, interesting comments and conversation, and that's what we love. That's what the podcast is all about. As you know, we do have United Nations of Photography.com. I'm writing 2 to 3 articles there every week at the moment. I seem to be somewhat inspired. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. But anyway, do please subscribe to that. You can subscribe very easily. There's a button at the top on the homepage on the right-hand side. You can click that and then you'll get alerted every time a new article is posted. And those articles are continuations, I should say, of the conversations that we have here on the podcast, and also observations I have as to where photography is going and where it's been, and where it is, I suppose, also. Anyway, that's it for this week's episode. These ones, when it's me on my own, are always slightly shorter. The ones with Bill, Fiona, and when we have photographers taking on the Proust quiz, they're longer. So if you haven't checked those out, do please dip back into the archive. It's a huge archive of photographers, of discussion and conversation. A lot of you say you enjoy them. That's really great for me to hear. Things have been really difficult over the last couple of weeks, haven't they, for all of us? The sense of insecurity could never be greater. And in moments like that, it's really important that we take care.